So what we have on the slide is basically the analytical framework that Maurice Stuck and myself developed first in an article, and later on we integrated it as part of the wider discussion in virtual competition. So what I would like to do is, in a way, set the scene as we see it. Of course, this is not the only way of analyzing these behaviors, but this is how we thought will be the most helpful way of trying to look at them. It all starts from the understanding that, of course, we have new dynamics on the online market. So the digital economy brings about new dynamics that change the way we communicate, change the way we collect information, change the type of data, and overall we speak about big data, big analytics. What separates us maybe from the first panel is that the data we talk about, at least under this theory of harm, is data about market. We're less concerned here with personal data about where you've been, what is it that you desire, and much more concerned about just data, understanding who sells what, at what price, and trying to gain a certain understanding about patterns that are available on the market. And what's unique about the digital economy, that A, the means have changed, and B, by changing the means, actually our ability to change the market dynamic suddenly developed. So we can shift from a position that we operate on a given market to a position that we, through algorithms, can actually try and fine-tune the market itself. Now, not everything is futuristic, and in the four categories that you see above you, basically we start from the very simple scenario where technology plays a secondary role, and we go to the other end of the spectrum when we speak about artificial intelligence and algorithms. And what I'll do is just give you some highlights about what we think are the issues for each one of those categories. So let me start with the messenger scenario. And the messenger scenario, in a way, it's a no-brainer. There's no issue here. It is basically a typical cartel. Human beings agree to fix the price, share the market, engage in any anti-competitive activity. And all they do is then, when they execute the cartel, they make use of the internet, algorithms, emails, anything that you could link to technology. And we have examples from the past. You have the whole cases when it comes to posters that are being sold online, and it can be a very relatively low-tech mechanism that you're using. A day after we all shook hands and agreed that prices for posters should go up, all we do is that either we exchange some messages, or in a more advanced scenario, what we do is each of us is basically establishing an algorithm, and the algorithm, all it has to do is monitor the market. So instead of your typical scenario where you will have maybe to visit your competitor's shop every day, or send someone, or have this promotion that actually mobilize the consumers to tell you if customers are getting a better deal elsewhere, you just have an algorithm that does that. What's the difference? From a legal perspective, none. Absolutely none. All the elements that you would expect to see when it comes, for instance, for Article 101 will be there. We have an agreement. We have basically the object of restricting competition. So this is really not where we have anything that is innovative. But the second one starts to look a bit differently, and that's the hub-and-spoke scenarios. Now, we're all familiar with hub-and-spoke conspiracies. The hub-and-spoke that we describe here is slightly different, because this is a hub-and-spoke that does not necessarily have the illicit intent that you will have in your classical hub-and-spoke conspiracy. So this is not me communicating to my supplier with the intent that the supplier will transmit that information to the other distributor, and he receives that information with the knowledge that I transmitted it, and then we have what is de facto a horizontal collusion through vertical means. Here we talk about things that are a bit weaker in nature. So Ituras is a very basic examples of basically having the upstream operator sending a message downstream through the spokes, telling them to restrict discounts. But that's really the simplistic element, and here as well you won't see anything new. But once you move beyond that, then we start to see things that are very interesting and are not present elsewhere. Think about dynamic pricing. We all know that when we shop online, the price is determined in a different way than it is determined when you go to a brick-and-mortar shop. Why is that? Because prices tend to fluctuate very quickly. So whereas in your local shop, The shopkeeper might change the price once a week, maybe twice a week. Online, prices might change every second. And how is this done? It is done by computer algorithms, advanced algorithms that are basically looking at the market, and through dynamic pricing, they try to identify what is the likely demand, what is the likely supply, what might be the best price to maximize your profit. Now, some companies are very advanced and they will have their own algorithms, but many companies outsource that function. So you can outsource the function of dynamic pricing to a company that specializes in those algorithms. And here we reach a very interesting proposition. What if I sell, let's say, office equipment, and I outsource my pricing to that company, company A, and you sell office equipment, and you also sell it online, and you also realize that you have to change the prices because the game is a game of dynamic pricing, and you also outsource it to company A, and so is the third and the fourth one. Suddenly, we have a hub and spoke structure that was just created organically, naturally. Now, there's no doubt that when I joined that company, I had no idea about what is going to happen. But at what point do we treat it as a hub and spoke with this illicit idea, or maybe never? And at what point do we have to start worry about what might be the impact of that? And just think about it. As a company that determines the dynamic pricing, if I control the pricing of all competitors, then I can really deliver on my promise that you will make more money. There's absolutely no problem in that. And actually, if you surf the web, you'll see that many companies promise that. And if even you think of the evolution of algorithms, you can see how even if different companies will operate on the market, it is likely that the algorithm that is the winning algorithm will be the dominant algorithm. In other words, if I have a technology which is not optimal, I'm likely to be pushed out of the market. So eventually, the brains that are determining the price become quite similar to each other. And an example that is quite illustrative, but I have to say, not at all anti-competitive at this stage, is Uber. Because Uber is an excellent example of an algorithm determining the price and transmitting that price through the spokes. So when you use Uber, how is the price determined? It is determined by a central algorithm, and that algorithm will determine the price that will affect how much you will pay for the ride. Now, of course, all of us benefit from better prices when we use Uber at the moment, but just for the sake of illustration, think about that. The price that Uber actually charges you is created in an artificial world. When the Uber algorithm is being informed through the weather channel that there is rain, the price goes up. If the Uber algorithm in Australia, in Sydney, is being informed that there was a terror attack, the price goes up. Why? To encourage more supply. But the fact is that we are starting to see the creation of price, which is detached to some extent from reality. You might leave King's College now, and there will be 300 cabs waiting for you. But if the Uber algorithm thought that there is a sport event on the other side of town and there will be no supply here, the price will be higher. So there are interesting things that happen both in terms of the hub and spoke, but also in the concentration of the decision-making as to the price, and the possibility that that will not necessarily be in line with what we would normally expect from a market dynamic. Okay, let's move to the third scenario, and here we're really starting to talk about things that I think are quite interesting, and to some extent I think the Commission is now, with its new investigation, likely to explore this as well. And we call it tacit collusion on steroids. Now, we had a very helpful first presentation, so we all understand basically the conditions. Now, think about that. In a normal, typical market of tacit collusion, let's say we have a village, we have 4 sellers of coffee, it's a transparent market, I decrease my price, you see that your customers are walking toward me, you decrease your price, very easy. But what if I'm not predictable? What if I decided to plant some trees in front of my shop and you don't see whatever is happening with me? Now let's move to the digital market. And on the digital market, we have the transparency, we have the algorithms that we are all already familiar with because we know that they can run in the background and check the price. And then the question is, can I actually create a market dynamic that creates tacit collusion? Now, this will not happen every time. If I have as many sellers as the people in this room, of course, tacit collusion is not likely to be sustainable. But in some markets that at the moment are outside tacit collusion, in other words, the equilibrium that we have is relatively competitive, the introduction of pricing algorithms and the presence of over-transparency result in transparency backfiring. And what we might have is the possibility to increase price. All I have to do is to program my algorithm to